Good afternoon to all. Uh, Thank you, Mrs. Vasundhara, for having me here, and thank you, Marianne, for the warm introduction. And I think the first two panel discussions were so interesting, and I was totally engrossed, and I've learned so much from that. We've talked about diabetes, hypertension. Now let's go a little retro, one step prior to what happens in the society as such before somebody is diagnosed of diabetes and hypertension. So I have a set of slides. Can I have, yeah, thank you. So I work for NU Hospitals, which is a nephrology specialty. And I'm also involved with a lot of community work with the Satyasai Trust, where we see rural women, pregnant women, adolescents, and children. What we see basically is that earlier we had this notion that urban India has a lot of the junk food intake, and then hence we have all these disease spiking in the urban areas, and then the rural community is kind of a little buffered to this effect, and then they still eat healthy. But then believe me, when I started doing my community work in these areas, the suburban areas, the myth was shattered, basically. So we all know this. So, but apart from the diabetes and hypertension, which is the leading cause of kidney disease, we also have to constantly remind ourselves that obesity or overweight can be an independent risk factor for kidney disease. There is enough research today to show you that lifestyle and disease and how you lead your everyday routine and what you eat every day can have a big impact on preventing the development of diabetes or hypertension, and not only, and if you are already diagnosed of diabetes and hypertension, how well you can control it. There is also enough research to say that obesity is related to kidney disease, and we see people who don't have any other issues, probably just that their BMI is tipping above the normal range, who come to us and get diagnosed of kidney disease. There are studies to show that obesity is an independent risk factor. Now, when we talk about overweight, obesity, now in general in India, we have this notion, even in our own family, when we are not being healthcare professionals, but we are meeting our relatives or family casually, we have this notion amongst us that somebody who's a little like prosperous or overweight is healthy. Oh, he's a healthy guy. And somebody who is a little underweight, she's very weak. Why? So this common notion still exists amongst most of the families. So I think one thing we should do is to be aware of what is normal, what is overweight, and what is obese. So we have this very easy way of calculating, which you all know, the BMI. But then let me bring this to your notice that we as Indians have a little different set of BMI. It's not the regular, when you Google and look for BMI or use the regular BMI calculators, what comes in the normal range is not the same for us Asians, because of the high risk factor that we have for cardiovascular diseases and other non-communicable diseases. The BMI for Indians is a little altered or skewed. Our normal is only between 18 and 22, to put it broadly, whereas in the international standards, up to 24.5, you're okay. And we call anybody with BMI 22 to 25 as overweight and above 25 as obese, whereas in the international standards, and it is above 30, 29.99. Above that is what is called obese. So we have to be aware of this classification for us Indians. Now we know this, we don't have to go into this. So there can be many causes for being overweight or obese, and of course we cannot do much about medications or hormonal changes, but then there are a lot many causes which can be tackled and which can be controlled, like, you know, the lifestyle practices, the daily habits, the amount of calories one ingests, the amount of exercise, the sleep hours, not just the sleep hours, but what time you go to bed and what time you wake up. All these are the ones that actually determine our weight in the long run. So we all know the two main causes are the increased intake of calories, reduced expenditure of calories, and this kind of inactive lifestyle, which has actually increased due to in the last 2-3 years because of the COVID, work from home and things like that. Now we see a lot of youngsters, high school children, college children coming up with obesity. Now, I'm not going to talk about what to eat and what not to eat to this august audience. We all know, we have a fair idea of what is healthy and what is not healthy. But let me just point out to some of the habits or some of the trends that are now prevalent in the community and which is so much taken as normal. No, we fail to recognize that as the triggers for the development of NCDs. Now, when we go out to dine or when we go out to eat, the portion sizes, have you ever observed how the portion sizes have changed in the last 10 years? The portion sizes have increased. Everybody wants a bigger plate, a bigger portion. The focus there is, what am I getting out of my money? They never focus about what am I eating, is this healthy for me? That's one trend. And then if you look at the kind of meal patterns that served by the restaurants, it's more of a buffet. Nobody is anymore happy with a single a la carte. It's the buffet. They want a wide spread of food over there. That's become more or less common these days. So there are advertisements focusing telling you about a dil mange more, and then dar ke aage jeet hai, and things like that, giving that kind of an excitement to the youngsters and telling them to go for more. So this has become the trend these days. And also, as parents, I have myself observed amongst my friends, colleagues, and around in my community that we are more obliging parents. Our parents were more disciplining parents, and we as parents have become more obliging. These are all the points that have probably tipped the scales and taken unhealthy eating to be a pretty more common thing. So if I improve my weight, am I going to benefit? What am I going to? It's not aesthetics or anything around aesthetics now. It's more about health. The community has to realize this. Because when I was talking to one patient who was newly diagnosed of diabetes, and she was obese, and I was telling the family that by reducing weight, her diabetes can also be controlled very well. Immediately the family said, "Oh, abhi isko kaha ramp pe chadna hai?" It's not about ramp walk, or it's not about that. It's about health. So the families also need to get educated. I think as healthcare workers, we all have this responsibility of making the families aware of these things. So to control diabetes or hypertension or body weight, there are 3 important things that we start off with. There's always micromanagement, there's always precision nutrition for each patient when we have time. But on the whole, what you do is first start correcting the diet, then start tackling the behavioral modifications, and then start talking about exercise and start educating the patient about how important exercise is. So based on these 3 things, let's move on and just see what people have to say about diet. Now diet, now when you tell people that okay, losing weight helps you, now they want to fast track it. I have seen this kind of a diet on the Insta. Can I follow that? My friend followed this from the Facebook, and then she's lost 10 kgs in three months. Can I do that? So that's the kind of question that we get. And they're very unhappy when we tell them that you cannot lose that kind of a weight. It will have its own repercussions. It's not good for you. So there will be a lot of skin changes, there will be loss of hair, there will be loss of, there is weakness. There is actually, if you fast track weight loss, there is loss of muscle tissue as well to a great extent, which we don't want. We want to preserve the muscle tissue, we only want the adiposity to go. So we don't encourage more than 2 kg weight loss in a month, because that is very steady, and then the patient, most of them who lose in a steady way like this, keep to it for a long time. They don't put on weight very quickly again, because the body is more or less in an equilibrium, has reached that metabolic equilibrium. So that important piece of advice that we have to give our patients is not to follow fad diets and not to get into problems because of fad diets. I have seen, we constantly see patients who go to the gym, they do their gym, they take a lot of supplements, then land up with kidney stones, because beyond 1 year, they are not able to keep up to that routine. It's very hectic. So instead of landing in that kind of trouble, it's better to follow plan that has been approved by a clinical nutritionist. We all know so for this proper plan of weight loss, what we do is we play around with the carbohydrates, proteins and fats. What the fad diets do is they almost eliminate one kind of a macronutrient, for example the carbohydrates. So most of the fad diets work on the principle that you remove the carbohydrates, there is diabetes remission, weight loss and things like that. Instead, what is actually important is just change the proportion, change the ratio in which these macronutrients are adjusted in everyday meal. That is what is important, when the patient will get all the nutrition without the ill effects of weight loss. So we know good nutrition is not a magic bullet, and so it is not advisable to go for very fast weight loss plans, and more important is to be consistent and persistent and keep the good weight for a long period of time for those health benefits that we want in terms of diabetes, hypertension and kidney disease. We advocate this plate method mostly because people understand this very easily. So I think this plate is something that has to be put up in every OPD and has to be there in every community health clinic where people understand the way they have to eat. So it is how much of a portion is your carbohydrate, what is it that you have to, how you have to portion your plate with so much vegetables so that you get the fiber and the indigestible carbohydrates that play a very crucial role in controlling diabetes. And then the amount of protein. Now when we talk about our Indian population, we are very poor at eating protein. Protein is almost negligible in most households. What did you do today what did you have for breakfast? Chitrana. And what did you have yesterday? Some other bhat. So where's the protein? There's not much protein in our diet. And even the non-vegetarians who are eating non-veg probably eat it in an unhealthy way or by ordering it from restaurants, or many of them eat it only once or twice a week. They don't know that concept of healthy protein yet. So that is something very crucial for the weight management and diabetes. Moving on to salt and sugar, I think our previous speakers and panel discussions have also emphasized a lot on DASH diet and what the government is doing. FSSAI has come up with so many plans and ideas to cut down the amount of salt and sugar in the food that we eat. There was this Global Health Institute which did a survey in 2009. I think it was in 2009. It covered both urban and rural India, and then the amount of salt per head in India, consumption in India was around 11.2 grams. And what does WHO recommend? It recommends only 5 grams of salt for a healthy individual. Not for anybody who's diagnosed with hypertension, but for a healthy individual, it's 5 grams. So we are well above the double of what is recommended. And it was really sad to know that it was not just the urban community, it was even the rural community which was consuming excess salt. In the urban community, it was through fast foods. In the rural community, it was through pickles and other things. So, all over India, especially when you travel up northeast, the consumption increased, the amount of salt, basically. So, there was a popular ad put out by Fasai which said, "Aaj se thoda kam." Have you all heard it? It said, "Aaj se thoda kam." So, thoda kam what? Thoda kam namak, thoda kam chini, thoda kam tel. So, I think that is what we have to take forward. Aaj se thoda kam. How do you generally put a healthy diet as? Something that comes from non-processed food where the fat and sugar are very low. So the first choice of that kind of food will be vegetables. And if you're not a diabetic, you can enjoy a variety of fruits as well. Reduce the salt intake and stay hydrated. These are the 3 first things that I look for in my patient when they come, not with kidney disease, but just for hypertension or diabetes. Of course, the next, I don't have to talk about this. The patient will first ask me, what kind of oils do I use? So it's a very good question from their point of view, because fat is something that has taken it's got a very bad name. Basically, there are people who kind of totally avoid fat, which is not good as such. It's the healthy fats that are important. So a good knowledge of what is healthy and what is unhealthy in the fat category or the oil category is something that everybody should know. So essential fatty acids are important. So nobody should start cooking, just boiling food and eating it. Fat is required, but the kind of fat is important. So what works best for the community as a large is a diet which is high in vegetables and fruits, something which is rich in whole grains. And today when we talk about rich in whole grains, we have this year of millet coming up. This year has been declared as the millet year by the government of India. So millets, and being in Bangalore and Karnataka, I think we are very lucky. We have a whole range of millets here available here. Only thing you have to be sure is go for a most unprocessed kind of millets, and again, there is an industry waiting to cash in. So there is an industry waiting to make some dosa batter out of millet, some ganji out of millet. Those are not going to help you much. It's the unpolished millet that's going to help, and that's what we have to profess. Low fat dairy, lean meat, healthy fats in small quantities, and adequate fluids. I think these are the check marks we have to put when you look at a diet or take a diet recall from anybody, any patient or a friend or somebody from the community. These will actually tell us whether they are on the right track. Next comes the portion sizes. So this is the first checklist for most nutritionists. Moving on to physical activity, I can't emphasize enough. Recently we had a CME about protein in diabetes, wherein there were very good speakers with good experience who spoke about the real-time data that they had gathered in their clinics. So even if the protein intake increased from 2 to 4% on an everyday basis, there was a good protection and a good remission in case of diabetics, and also the HbA1c is reduced to a significant extent by just increasing 2 to 4% of protein in a person's diet. So I think that's the key here, especially in India. When we had a study that was, I think, done by physiologists from St. John's, where they put the patients, they put the people who were enrolled in a kind of a trial where they segregated them to the exercise group, the diet group, and the diet and the exercise group. And at the end of the study, they did muscle biopsies. Basically, people who were in the diet group, they also improved their muscle mass. So they also had a significant improvement in their muscle mass, but the quality of muscle, which is very important, we see in our Indian population, the quality of muscle is pretty bad. So it is the exercise, especially not all just aerobic exercise, but the strength training exercise, which gives the quality of that, improves the quality of the muscle. There was a lot of adipose infiltration into the muscle fibers, and that could be improved only with resistance training and resistance in exercises. So actually the advice given by that group after the study was that when the patients worked for 6 days on an exercise program, every alternate day has to be strength training, and the other alternate day has to be aerobics. So strength training becomes very important to improve muscle quality, and that muscle quality is the one that's going to help to improve the HbA1cs and improve the, bring down the weight very easily. So to prevent is always better. I don't have to tell this here when I have this crowd here. So if already kidney disease is already diagnosed, then what we do is in the initial stages, of course, the focus is on maintaining the underlying disease like the diabetes or hypertension. Later on, as the disease progresses, of course, we have to monitor the electrolytes, monitor the fluids, and then the protein. Now again, it is not just, people just go in, Google in CKD, diet for CKD, and they say, oh, the protein has to be reduced, protein is bad. So they start stopping all kinds of protein food, dals, pulses, no curd, nothing. And in 3 months, when we see the patient is so wasted and sitting there with a weak smile, we feel so bad. See, I think that's one thing that again we have to take up on a war footing. It is not no protein diet. There has to be adequate protein. Dals and lentils have to be in a part of the diet. Even a CKD diet will be as close to a normal balanced diet as possible. That's very important to keep up the nutritional status in the long run. And we all know what happens if the nutritional status is not kept up. If the patient is already sarcopenic when he enters dialysis. So it's an uphill task to improve their muscle status and quality of life, to be very precise. So we know what we have to do from the diet point of view. It's the protein manipulation or monitoring of protein, electrolytes, fluids, mineral bone disease, especially in children. But most of the time, by the time we see them, they are already into mineral bone disease. That's so, and especially because children eat a lot of junk. There are so much inorganic phosphates in the food they eat that they'll end up with mineral bone disease. Controlling blood sugars. So, I don't have to tell you what are the sources of protein, but only one thing that I would want to emphasize is that when we talk of proteins, again, we should not forget carbohydrates, because carbohydrates have this protein sparing action. Unless you give adequate amount of carbohydrates or calories to that patient, the protein that you are giving is not going to be used for muscle repair or muscle protection. It's going to be just wasted on spending basically. So the potassium and the phosphorus game is something that we as renal nutritionists are used to playing on a regular basis. It is a challenge. It is a big challenge for the patients as well as the caregivers and us to monitor their potassium. It is very easy to say, oh, only if your potassium increases, we will reduce it, otherwise it's okay. But the problem is once they reach end-stage renal disease, most of them have altered electrolytes. So that's another challenge that have to be tackled. But the most important thing is the first line of elimination, like this, the food that have excess salt, the food that have inorganic phosphates in the form of food additives, those have to be eliminated. So controlling blood sugars, that's another important thing that we have to look. So having to monitor electrolytes, fluids, as well as blood sugars together is, and again, another challenge. Most of the protein food has high phosphorus. So that's, all those have to be, you have to sit with the patient and curate a diet specific to the patient based on their tastes, based on their, what they eat, their culture. And it, believe me, if it's a diabetic diet, I take 30 minutes to counsel, but then if it is a renal diet, it will be 45 minutes. But that time, I know, goes a long way in assuring the patient. Once they go home, they get so confused as to what to eat. Every time they pick up a food, they're like, oh, can I eat this? And along with that, there are so many false information or myths in the media. There was one patient who came to me and said, she had a plate that we had served in the as for lunch, and then she said, you have given me tomato. I said, yes, so what? There is tomato, there is red here. I said, so fine, it's so what? You can eat it. So, no, my doctor, she was from a different country, told me not to eat anything that is red. So, these are the challenges we face every day. So, they say, oh, nahi doctor, wo seed hai na, seed jaake stone ban jayega. So, right from here to people who actually know and they want to, really follow the nutrition and keep up their nutritional status, it's a big spectrum of patients for whom I think it's worth catering your time and knowledge too, because it goes a long way in, first of all, preventing kidney disease, and then retarding the progress or decelerating the progress of kidney disease. With this, I thank you. Thank you for the patient listening.